Not everyone has the courage to live a life that doesn't require applause. Most people wake up each day and enter the world with a mindset of needing to please someone, to be noticed, to be acknowledged, to be praised. They don't live for themselves. They perform for others. But you are different. The first awakening is to stop chasing the approval of the world, to no longer live up to expectations that were never yours to begin with, but to return to your true values, the ones you define and protect on your own terms. You don't need to be loud to assert yourself. You don't need to force anything to prove your worth. In a world where everyone is screaming to be heard, it's intentional silence that holds the real power to command attention. When you channel your energy entirely into silent growth, you don't need to shout to the world that you're making progress, because eventually the results will speak, and they will echo louder than any justification you ever thought you needed. No one can fully understand the path you're walking. They don't know the sleepless nights you've endured, the silent battles you've fought, the moments you've chosen discipline over surrender. They only see the refined version of you that you allow them to witness. And because of that, you don't need to explain. You don't need to prove anything. All you need to do is keep going, keep building, keep refining yourself, regardless of who's watching. Some will wonder why you've become distant. Some will think you're cold or indifferent. But what they don't see is that you are giving your highest focus to your own journey. They don't know that while they're busy judging you, you've already laid the foundation for a life that cannot be shaken. You are rewriting the operating system of your mind, renewing outdated beliefs, and clearing your mind of the need to be validated by anyone else. The world doesn't need you to put on a show. The world needs you to be steadfast. No applause is more valuable than the peace that comes from living in alignment with your own values. And you won't find that if you keep living to please people who don't even understand who you are. Focusing on yourself is not selfish. It is the highest form of self-respect, because if you don't take time to build yourself, you'll be forced to live according to someone else's blueprint. The quieter you become, the more you can hear the true voice within. The more you stop chasing external validation, the more you realize that peace doesn't come from outside, it comes from within, from knowing exactly who you are, what you want, and no longer needing anyone to confirm it. You don't need the whole world to understand. You only need yourself to stop doubting. It's time to stop wasting energy explaining your choices to those who will never understand. Every explanation is a moment where you shrink yourself, and you weren't born to fit into someone else's mold. You were born to expand your own limits. You don't need applause. You need progress. You don't need an audience. You need persistence. You don't need admiration. Only a promise to yourself that says, I will keep going, even if no one sees, even if no one supports, even if no one believes. The path to personal growth requires intentional separation. You can't build a strong tower while standing at the crossroads of 100 voices. Every time you turn back because someone doesn't understand you, you're pausing your own evolution. And this world doesn't need you to pause. It needs you to become the strongest version of yourself. You don't owe anyone an explanation for your growth. You don't need anyone's sympathy for your perseverance. You don't have to provide proof of what you're building in silence, because everything that's truly valuable takes time to mature, and when the time comes, the results will speak for themselves. Then, no one will ask, how did you do it? They will simply stand in silence and feel the solid presence you've become. The world is too used to people who talk a lot but do nothing. That's why when you work in silence, people get uncomfortable, because you remind them of what they haven't faced yet. That growth doesn't come from noise, but from unwavering commitment to oneself. When you no longer need to be validated, you begin to live authentically. And when you live authentically, you begin to build a life that needs no proof. No one stands in your way more than the part of you that wants to be recognized. When you overcome that, you'll realize you never needed anyone's approval, because your daily actions were already the strongest declaration you could ever make. People often mistake silence for weakness. They assume that if you don't speak up, you have nothing to say. If you withdraw from the crowd, you must be failing. But what they don't know is that in those very moments of silence, a person is being forged. Silence is not surrender. It is the sign of inner strength accumulating. Because the weak speak often. The strong act quietly. And those who truly change the world are often the ones no one suspects, because they are too busy sharpening themselves in the dark to care about being seen. Every time you choose silence in the face of provocation, it's not because you cannot respond. It's because you've matured enough to realize there's no need to waste your energy on meaningless battles. Every time you choose not to disclose your plans, it's not due to a lack of confidence. It's because you understand that great things must be protected from noise. The undisciplined speak first and act later. The disciplined act first and let the results speak for them. Silence is not the end. Silence is the beginning. It is the place where the internal storm settles so you can see yourself more clearly. It's where external noise can no longer interfere with your inner clarity. In that silence, you are no longer dragged by meaningless distractions. You're left with only yourself, your goals, your path, and the reason you began in the first place. There are people who vanish from social media, who stop posting updates, who no longer share what they're doing. The crowd thinks they've fallen behind, failed, or lost direction. But in truth, that's when they are entering the most crucial phase of transformation. They're not lost. They're redefining their direction. They're not failing. They're preparing for a return that will make every assumption irrelevant. And they're not falling behind. They're rising, not on the path of the masses, but to the rhythm of their own. They don't need to be understood. They don't need support, because those who are shaping themselves in silence do not need an audience. All they need is an unwavering internal commitment. They don't need reminders, because their inner hunger is more than enough to keep them awake. True discipline doesn't require an alarm clock. It comes from absolute clarity about what you're pursuing. Don't confuse silence with emptiness. It is the soil where deep roots grow. Every strong structure is built quietly. People only notice the towering building once it's complete, but they forget the hundreds of days when silent foundations were laid. You are the same. On mornings when others sleep, you're already up and working. On nights when the crowd is entertaining themselves, you're still writing, studying, focusing. That is the powerful silence the world cannot measure, but will one day have to acknowledge. True growth does not require applause. It requires discipline. And the most enduring form of discipline is the ability to act in silence. No one needs to know what you're doing. What matters is that you never stop. You don't have to announce your plans to anyone. You only need to keep the promises you've made to yourself. This world has too many people who are good at making declarations, and far too few who are steadfast enough to act without needing praise. Silence is the choice of those who know exactly where they are going. They don't shout to be noticed because attention is not the goal. They don't seek the spotlight because the spotlight won't take them farther. They only seek one thing, the truth. And truth only appears when you are quiet enough to hear it. When you are silent, you are not distracted by praise or criticism. You are not led astray by the noise of others. You return to yourself, the only place you can truly control, shape, and master. Look at the people you admire most. They are not loud. They don't need to say what they're doing. They just keep going. And the results make others look up in awe. That is the power of silence nourished by discipline. That is the unshakable strength of someone who has nothing to prove, because their life itself is the evidence. You don't need to shout that you're changing. You only need to keep going. Keep going even when no one sees. Keep going even when no one cheers you on. Keep going even when at times you doubt yourself. Because growth doesn't happen during the moments when you are celebrated. It happens in the moments when you push yourself in solitude, in silence, in nameless effort. And one day, when people look at you, they won't be able to help but wonder, how did you rise like that? They won't understand because they weren't there when you fell and got back up. They weren't there when you chose focus over distraction, progress over complaints. And because of that, they will never truly grasp the power within you, the power born of discipline and nurtured in silence. The desire for recognition is a natural human instinct, but that very need, if left unchecked, becomes a sweet trap that pulls you off course. Some people start out with the right ambition, but after a few rounds of applause, they shift direction, lose sight of their original purpose, and compromise their inner integrity. They no longer act out of what is right, but out of what is praised. And that is when their goal turns into a performance. You can either live according to others' expectations, or you can live in alignment with the deepest direction within you, but you cannot do both at once. When you live to seek recognition, you unconsciously hand over control of your life to outsiders. From then on, every step you take is no longer a deliberate choice, but a reaction to applause or silence from the crowd. When they cheer, you move forward. When they fall silent, you slow down. That's not focus, that's being led. True focus cannot coexist with the desire to be noticed, because attention always dilutes the mind. It makes you look sideways, measure others' reactions before acting, and constantly adjust yourself to fit someone else's gaze. But focus demands that you look forward, move forward, unaffected by any glance, undisturbed by any compliment. When you are brave enough to turn down unnecessary recognition, you begin to preserve your most valuable resource, complete presence in what you are doing. Results don't come from the desire to be recognized. They come from the ability to act regardless of whether anyone is applauding. You don't need someone else to confirm that what you're pursuing is right. You only need to be clear enough to know what is right for you, what makes you grow, what makes you awaken. Recognition only has value when it's a byproduct, not a goal. When you make it something to be achieved, you allow yourself to be governed by something uncertain and unstable. Some people spend their whole lives playing the role of the easily likable. They do everything just to hear, "You're doing great," or "You're on the right path." But if all your motivation comes from others, then they also have the power to take it away at any moment. A single criticism can make you retreat. A single indifferent look can make you doubt yourself. At that point, your focus is no longer inside, it's suspended from others' lips. True success doesn't lie in being seen. It lies in maintaining your pace when no one is watching. The people who change the game are not the ones who receive the most cheers. They are the ones who keep going when the spotlight is off, when no one is paying attention, when all eyes have shifted elsewhere. They don't do it to be seen. They do it because it needs to be done. Recognition is a kind of sweet sugar, addictive. The more you get, the more you crave. But like sugar, the more you have, the easier it is to lose control. Once you become used to needing recognition, you will constantly adjust to keep it, even if it means compromising your principles. That's when you lose your direction without realizing it. That's when you work hard, but not for the right reasons, and eventually you no longer recognize yourself. Rejecting recognition doesn't mean becoming indifferent to the world. It means you prioritize alignment with yourself over external approval. You don't deny the value of compliments, you just don't depend on them. You welcome them if they come, but you don't pause to wait for them. Because if you stop every time someone praises you, you'll never make it to the end of the road. Focus is the ability to act even when no one knows. It's the commitment to what matters, even when no one is watching. It's the quiet perseverance that doesn't waver in the face of the world's silence. You don't need to be recognized to believe in yourself. You only need to remember that it is the repeated actions done in silence that generate the loudest results. Successful people don't ask, "What do people think of me?" They ask, "Have I done what is necessary?" Look back at your own journey. How many times have you strayed from your path because someone didn't understand you? How many times have you adjusted your passion because someone didn't believe in it? And how many times have you delayed something important just because you thought, no one supports this yet? In those moments, you didn't just delay action, you eroded the confidence that was always yours to begin with. Every time you live for recognition, you drift further from yourself. Learn to stand firm in the indifference of others. Learn to move forward in silence, and learn to measure your progress by looking within, not by watching how the world reacts. You can't maintain your center if you keep chasing external attention. But once you direct all your energy inward, you will no longer be led. You will begin to lead your own life. This world has a habit of demanding explanations. Explanations for why you're silent. Explanations for why you're not updating your journey. Explanations for why you haven't succeeded just yet. But the truth is, those who are truly building something of value have no time to present slides, because they know that results big enough will make noise on their own. They don't need announcements. They don't need to be forced into proof. Once you do the right thing the right way at the right time, results will speak for you, loud and undeniable. Those who lack inner strength constantly need to tell the world what they're doing. They need to prove they're on track. But those who are truly focused say nothing. They're busy doing, busy training, busy correcting mistakes, busy rising after every fall. They don't need to send out signals because they understand that every minute spent explaining to others is a minute not spent on real progress. The quieter they become, the stronger they get. The less they speak, the more they have to show at the right moment. True maturity makes no sound. It needs no report cards, no quotes, no flashy speeches. It's recognized in the eyes, in the energy, in the presence. Those who have forged themselves in silence carry an energy that others can feel, even without a single word. That's something you can't fake and something you can't force, because inner power doesn't come from words. It comes from every repeated action, even when no one is watching. You don't need to declare that you're changing. You only need to actually change. You don't need to announce that you're trying. You just need to never stop trying. The results will appear as living proof. No explanations needed, no justifications, no permission from anyone to be recognized. Every word spoken beforehand becomes redundant when the result finally shows. And the miracle is, those who once doubted you will be left speechless, not because you silenced them, but because you've moved far beyond what they're capable of understanding. So great achievements don't need noise to precede them. They need a long, quiet process so that when they emerge into the light, nothing can overshadow them. That's why you don't need to report your progress every day. No need to post constant updates just to say, I'm still on track. The silence while you work will be repaid by the echo when results arrive. And that echo cannot be silenced because it comes from substance, not publicity. Those who constantly talk about what they're going to do are often the ones who do the least. They live in promises, in plans, in dreams, but not in action. In contrast, those who are truly doing something valuable have no urge to share every step. They understand that anything worth proving will eventually be confirmed by the only thing that can't be faked: results. And that's the only thing you should place your full trust in. Don't let the need to be seen scatter your focus. Every time you pause to flaunt what you're doing, you sever the flow of your concentration. Acting in silence isn't about fear of judgment. It's about understanding that no compliment holds more value than a real step forward. Full focus only exists when you're no longer pulled by external gazes. And when you act from that place, the result you produce carries a weight that cannot be ignored. When you're building something big enough, you don't need to knock on every door asking for attention. People will come looking when what you've created begins to touch them in ways no words ever could. The beauty of a silent journey is that your results become the most unexpected truth. Not because you wanted to surprise anyone, but because you never needed to announce anything. You just needed to do your part and let the outcome do its own. Some things don't need to be said. They only need to be proven through action. Some changes don't need to be shared. They just need to show up in how you live and what you choose, and how you remain committed to what you believe in. And one day, you yourself will become the answer to every doubt ever thrown your way. Not through words, but through the steady presence of someone who's lived enough to no longer need to explain. You don't need to shout about what you've overcome. You just need to keep living as if everything has shaped you into a version that can no longer be shaken. Real results never need PR. Because when they arrive, they come with one thing the world cannot ignore: the truth. Motivation is like a flame, ignited by emotion. It burns bright in a moment, then quickly fades when the inspiration vanishes. Discipline is different. It's the solid ground beneath your feet, the unchanging force that remains steady no matter how the weather of your mind shifts. Those who live by motivation can only move forward when everything goes well. Those who live by discipline keep going even when there's no clear reason to believe, when doubt fills their mind, when they're exhausted and alone. And it is precisely in those moments that they shorten the distance to achievements others only dream of. Don't mistake initial excitement for sustainable ability. Everyone has had a morning where they woke up full of energy, made new plans, wrote down new goals, shouted bold new commitments. But just a few days later, when the emotion fades, everything returns to the old loop. Not because they lack ability, but because they didn't build a system of action strong enough to hold when motivation disappeared. And the truth is, you cannot wait for good feelings to do the right thing. You must learn to do the right thing regardless of how you feel. And that's the work of discipline. Discipline doesn't need you to feel ready. It only needs you to act. Tired? Do it anyway. Unmotivated? Do it anyway. No one watching? Still do it. Because you know that everything you're trying to build depends on repetition. Not mindless repetition, but conscious, intentional, strategic repetition. Every time you choose action over delay, you're sending a signal to yourself that says, I am trustworthy. And when that trust is reinforced long enough, you become someone even you respect deeply. Those who rely on inspiration will always be ruled by emotions. On good days, they achieve a lot. On bad days, they abandon the work. They live like a boat without a rudder, dragged by the current of their moods. But the disciplined person is the one holding the wheel. They don't wait for calm seas to set sail. They learn to row in stormy waters. Because they understand no journey worth taking comes without the demand for resilience. Your strength doesn't lie in what you can do when you feel good. It lies in your ability to keep doing what needs to be done even when you have no inspiration left. Great people are not great because they're always fired up. They are great because they've trained themselves to show up every single day, even when no one's watching, no one's cheering, no one expects it of them. And it's that consistent showing up, accumulated over time, that leads to breakthroughs. Nothing magnificent is built from fleeting emotions. Everything solid is formed from deliberate behavior. Discipline isn't glamorous. It's not pretty on social media. No one cheers for it. But it is the foundation, the pillar, the thing that keeps you grounded when everything else around you is in flux. You can't build anything without discipline. Whether it's a healthy body, a stable mind, a solid career, or meaningful relationships, they all require consistency. And every bit of consistency starts with discipline. Ignore it and you're building a house on sand. Think back to the times you gave up halfway. It wasn't because you lacked ability. It wasn't because you lacked goals. It was because you lacked the discipline to keep going when nothing was pushing you forward. You can read all the books you want, watch all the motivational videos, but if you don't engage, repeat, train, and build, it will all remain theory. Discipline doesn't require you to understand everything first. It just asks you to act first. Act, and then you'll understand more. Do, and then you'll believe more. Repeat, and then you'll see the progress. The biggest difference between those who succeed and those who stay stuck isn't intelligence, talent, or starting conditions. It's the ability to keep taking action long enough to pass the breaking point. Those without discipline always stop just before the miracle happens. But those with discipline, they stay. They keep going, and they are the ones who get to witness what no one else has the chance to see. You don't need to master discipline for a lifetime today. You just need to start with one small choice. Get up on time, exercise even when lazy, write one page even when out of ideas, resist social media for 30 more minutes to read a chapter. These small acts, when sustained, compound, and one day you won't need to force yourself anymore, because discipline has become part of who you are, as natural as breathing. A disciplined person is not someone who never gets tired. They are someone who knows fatigue, but keeps going anyway. They don't need to feel good to take action. It is steady action that creates a positive state. And that is something the motivation-driven person will never understand. Inspiration is not something you wait for. It's the reward given to those who act before they feel ready. Not every word deserves a reply, not every attack requires a fight, and not every misunderstanding needs to be explained. In a world where everyone is shouting to be heard, the one who can remain silent is the one truly in control. Silence is not weakness. Silence means you are strong enough not to speak, and in many cases it is the most powerful response you can choose. Not loud, not compromising, not dragged into meaningless storms. As you begin your journey of growth, you realize a truth. The more you react, the more power you lose. The more you get triggered by baseless comments, the easier it is to be pulled into unnecessary mud. A wise person isn't the one with the sharpest comeback, but the one who chooses what is worth spending energy on. Timely silence is not surrender. It is a deep kind of counterstrike. It leaves opponents reaching into thin air, leaves the crowd confused, and allows you to move forward with peace, untouched, and intact. You don't need to speak every time someone distorts the truth. You don't need to clarify every time you're misunderstood. Because if someone truly wanted to understand you, they wouldn't have listened to only one side. And if someone has already decided to believe the wrong version, no words from you can change their mind. So why sacrifice your inner peace just to earn recognition that holds no value? The answer is you don't need to. Instead, let silence be your most refined form of rejection. Reject reacting. Reject entering the swamp. Reject letting others control your emotions. The most vulnerable people are those who react to everything. They become puppets in the hands of the world, pulled by every comment, every glance, every critique. But those who know their worth have no need to argue. They know. The most valuable voice is action, is results, is the quiet strength of inner clarity. The more mature someone is, the more they understand. Silence is not absence, it's space where inner power is most clearly revealed. Silence is also how you protect your mind from unconscious reactions. Every time you respond, you give away a portion of your energy, and it's not always worth it. Ask yourself, does this make me better? If not, step back and hold your silence. Because the one thing you truly need to preserve is mental clarity. Not who's right or wrong with others, but the purity within yourself. This world has too many people trying to prove they're right, and too few trying to understand themselves. You don't need to win an argument, you need to win at life. And life does not reward those who win debates. It rewards those who preserve energy to create what matters. Each time you choose silence over reaction, you're accumulating clarity, composure, and strength, things no words can replace. Not reacting doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you don't let emotions take over. You choose to respond to the world with intention. Silence isn't submission. It's control. It's how you step away from the game of manipulation, of provocation, of toxic invitations. And in that refusal to participate, you hold a higher position, not because you're trying to be superior, but because you no longer waste time proving anything. Look at the truly formidable people. They are never loud. They don't need to shout that they're right. They let their presence speak. That's what makes them credible. That's why people listen when they do speak, because they don't waste their words. Silence gives weight to your voice. Those who speak too much and react too fast eventually become background noise no one wants to hear anymore. Learn to stay still, not to avoid, but to grow. Not to retreat, but to avoid being dragged down. Not to accept what's wrong, but to protect what's right being built within you. Every time you choose silence, you're returning to your center, where you can see more clearly, think more wisely, and choose actions more intelligently. Silence prevents you from being judged by your immediate emotions. It gives you time to assess, so you don't get caught in reactions you'll regret later. It allows you to preserve your dignity when others lose theirs. And it lets you uphold your standards of conduct, even when the world around you seems to have abandoned theirs. True growth never happens under the spotlight. It is quiet, discreet, without witnesses, without applause. People often admire the results, but overlook the process. They see you shining today and think it happened overnight, but you know well, real change doesn't come from public performance. It comes from the moments no one notices, no one expects, no one cheers. It comes from the hours where it's just you with yourself, and yet you keep going. Not everyone can endure the feeling of walking in the dark without knowing when the light will appear. But it is those who dare to walk anyway that possess the most resilient inner strength. Because they don't walk to be seen. They walk because they know they must. They don't need the promise that someone is watching, applauding. The only thing anchoring them to their path is an unconditional commitment to themselves, and only such people truly evolve. Evolution is not loud. It doesn't need to be announced. It doesn't need an audience. Meaningful transformation doesn't depend on whether others see it. It depends on whether you stay loyal to it even when no one cares. Can you maintain discipline when no one is watching? Continue learning, training, adjusting yourself when no praise appears? Stand tall in solitude without slipping into despair? If you can answer these questions with action, then you are evolving, even if the world has yet to notice. Don't confuse silence with stagnation. Don't let your absence from social media make you question your progress. Not updating doesn't mean you're doing nothing. Not sharing doesn't mean you're not advancing. There are steps only you will know, battles only you will witness, and deep transformations that happen only in the nameless quiet. That's why you don't need an audience for your evolution, because what you're building isn't for show. It's for you to live. You don't need to prove you're on the right path. You just need to stay on it long enough and deep enough that all doubts dissolve on their own. A tree doesn't need to shout to grow. It only needs to sink its roots deeply into the ground and silently stretch upward, millimeter by millimeter. And then one day, people will look up at it, unable to understand how it grew so tall. You are the same. Keep rooting yourself in disciplined behavior, in sound thinking, in habits only you know the value of. Because real results never need advertisement. The weak live for the spotlight, the strong live for their inner light. You don't need anyone to shine a light on you if you are the light. And that light doesn't appear magically, it's ignited bit by bit through every moment you refuse to quit. Every morning you rise on time despite exhaustion. Every night you keep writing, reading, learning, even when no one is waiting for the outcome. Those small, quiet moments, if accumulated long enough, become an inner radiance no external light can replace. Some progress has no photo, no status update, no clear proof to post, but it's real, it exists. It reshapes how you think, how you respond, how you face challenges, and because no one sees it, it becomes even deeper. That is the nature of evolution. It happens in the dark, where you're no longer distracted by the need for recognition, where you can truly hear your inner voice, undisturbed by the crowd. There will be days you ask yourself, am I even heading in the right direction when no one is watching? The answer is yes, if you're still moving toward what you truly want. No, if you stop, just because no one is clapping. You don't need proof to keep going. You only need to keep going, because when the results come, they will be so powerful that every moment of prior silence becomes a solid foundation no one can deny. Believe this, Everything great needs time in the dark. A fetus needs 9 months in the womb. A seed must lie quietly beneath the soil before it sprouts, and you too. What you're doing today, even if no one sees, is quietly reshaping your life. Don't rush to reveal. Don't hurry to share. Let the silence be the space where true strength is nourished. Not everyone who is busy is making progress. Not everyone who is moving is going in the right direction. And not everyone who smiles is truly happy. In an era where distraction is engineered as a sophisticated control system, what you need is not another reminder, but a reprogramming. A space where you consciously redesign your inner value system, where dopamine no longer leads the way and focus is restored to its rightful place. Distraction today no longer looks like blatant nonsense. It is disguised as information, as connection, as constant updates. You think you're learning, but in reality you're drifting in a sea of content. You think you're engaging in healthy entertainment, but in fact, you're being constantly fed short bursts of dopamine, gentle, pleasant, but potent enough to kill patience and depth of thought. And eventually, you lose the ability to distinguish between what you truly enjoy and what the algorithm has conditioned you to crave over the years. Short-term excitement is the most addictive sensation. It creates the illusion that you're living a fulfilled life, when in fact you're burning hours on experiences that add no depth to your mind. You're not growing. You're simply being indulged by swipes, by 30-second videos, by tiny pings that train your brain to believe this is the reward. But when a reward comes without effort, it becomes a trap. You're shackled by the very things that once gave you comfort. And dopamine addiction is no longer a distant term. It's the default lifestyle most of the world is unconsciously accepting. What comes easily is usually cheap. What requires no effort rarely leaves anything lasting behind. When dopamine becomes the primary driver of behavior, your ability to persist erodes. You can no longer wait, no longer tolerate boredom. And the irony is, every significant result in life lies on the other side of boredom. No one has ever built anything lasting without repeating unexciting, unglamorous tasks. But if you've been reprogrammed to only act when you feel like it, you will keep quitting before the truly meaningful part begins. Rebuilding values isn't about rejecting joy. It's the conscious choice to stay awake in a world obsessed with the easy route. It means stepping back from the noise and asking what truly matters. Which values are worthy of your time and energy? Which behaviors actually help you grow rather than just give you a temporary high? And soon you'll realize clarity doesn't come from knowing more, but from knowing what to eliminate, from being able to say no to what gives you immediate pleasure in favor of what will make you genuinely proud. Quitting dopamine isn't easy because it's not just behavior, it's a neurological pattern built over years. But if you don't actively rewire it, it will lead you by the hand without asking permission. Every time you scroll to forget fatigue, every time you watch to escape sadness, every time you tap to feel busy, you're missing an opportunity to face yourself. And no one truly grows while running from their inner silence. You need boredom. You need quiet mornings. You need evenings without screens. You need hours where nothing happens except your breathing, because it is in that monotony that the mind is cleaned. Willpower is forged. Focus is rebuilt from scratch. The less dopamine, the clearer you become. The fewer distractions, the more you realize what is worth keeping. And eventually you'll see minimalism isn't just a lifestyle. It's a psychological strategy for reclaiming sovereignty over your mind. Focus is no longer a competitive edge. It is a superpower. Because few people can still hold on to it. And you can't focus if dopamine is dictating your behavior. You can't think deeply if every uncomfortable emotion sends you to your phone for an escape. To create something meaningful, you must relearn how to be still, relearn how to sit with discomfort, Relearn how to face an ordinary day without needing a reward from the outside. That is the true maturity of the brain, when you no longer live by reflex but by intention. Choose again what you watch. Choose again how you use your time. Choose again the first actions you take when you open your eyes each morning. Because if you don't choose, someone else will choose for you. And they'll always choose what makes you dependent, not what makes you stronger. Real freedom doesn't come from being able to do anything. It comes from being able to say no to the things that lead you away from your essence. People often view discipline as a form of restriction, a string of days doing what they dislike, a kind of hardship in opposition to freedom. But if you look closer, you'll see it is those without discipline who are the most imprisoned. They are at the mercy of fleeting emotions, driven by dopamine cravings, pulled along by habits they can no longer control. They believe they're living by instinct, but in reality, they're living by unconscious programming. And the irony is, they call that indulgence, freedom. Discipline doesn't limit you. It limits only the things that harm you. It doesn't force harshness. It teaches conscious choice. It doesn't forbid pleasure. It protects you from becoming a slave to it. Discipline doesn't kill joy. It allows you to enjoy it at the right time, in the right way, without sacrificing your future for a few moments of short-lived satisfaction. Discipline is how you protect yourself from decisions that later cost you peace. You don't need to live an ascetic life, but you do need a solid behavioral system to steer the ship of your life. Discipline is that steering wheel. When you have discipline, you no longer feel lost at every crossroad. You know what deserves priority. You're not swayed by temptations, by trivial distractions, by easy pleasures. You uphold good habits while the world around you is drowning in delay. And then you no longer need to try to be better. You simply live in alignment with the system that produces results. Discipline is not coercion, it's intentionality. It's when you say no, not because you're forbidden, but because you know what's worth your time and energy. It's when you wake up early, not out of fear of being late, but because you want to own your day. It's when you skip a meaningless conversation, not out of arrogance, but because you honor the peace in your mind. And these seemingly small acts, repeated daily, are quietly building a rare form of freedom, the freedom from your undisciplined self. Look at someone without discipline. They wake whenever they feel like it, eat whenever they crave, work when inspired, rest when tired. It appears to be freedom, but it's actually reflexive living. Every choice dictated by emotion, and emotion, as you know, is the most unstable part of us. When you live by emotion, you're no longer the one making decisions. You're being led, manipulated, drained by things that don't matter. And the worst part? You don't even notice. You think it's just your personality, your true self, when in reality, it's an untrained version of who you could be. Freedom doesn't come from doing whatever you want. It comes from doing what's right, even when you don't want to. That's strength. That's inner power. That's what separates you from the crowd driven by instinct. And that power doesn't come in a day. It's forged through mornings you don't hit snooze, through nights when you finish writing one more page, even when your mind is exhausted, through moments when you choose silence over reaction, through every small act of self-command, repeated enough to shape a steadier, more resilient, and calmer version of you. A disciplined person isn't immune to temptation. They've simply built a wall strong enough that temptation can't break through. They still get tired, still feel bored, still get sad, but they don't let emotion dictate action. That's why they go further. They don't wait for inspiration to act, they act to create inspiration. They're not always ready, but they show up anyway. Not for others, not for praise, but because they've understood life doesn't reward promises. It rewards behavior. Discipline is you sitting down to work when you don't feel like it. Saying no to an outing so you can fulfill a personal commitment. Not spending money on something useless just to satisfy a fleeting ego. turning off your phone when you need to focus, cleaning your space even when no one asked, adjusting yourself instead of demanding others change. Each of these small acts, placed correctly, reshapes your entire life. No slogans needed, no declarations, just conscious repetition. And eventually you realize you don't need to control the world. You only need to control yourself. When you're disciplined, you no longer chase success, you attract it. You no longer need to grip tightly onto everything. You become so steady that nothing can take your self-mastery away. You step into the world with the calm certainty of someone who knows exactly what they're doing, where they're going, and why they must hold their course, no matter which way the wind blows. No one wakes up one morning and suddenly becomes successful. There are no shortcuts to a solid life. What you admire in others, their composure, wisdom, achievements, and grounded presence, are all the result of thousands of small choices they quietly made day by day, hour by hour. There are no trumpets when you make the right choice, no fireworks when you reject the easy in favor of what's valuable. But it is precisely those seemingly invisible moments that lay the strongest foundation for the life you are building. One small choice to get up on time or sleep 10 more minutes. One small choice to sit and write one more page or scroll through a few more short videos. One small choice to eat a healthy meal or give in to temporary satisfaction. One small choice to absorb an insult or stay silent and keep moving forward. These choices won't change your life overnight, but when repeated long enough, they accumulate, stacking like bricks, and you will one day walk into the house you've built with every single one of those decisions, no matter how small. Failure doesn't come from a single big mistake. It comes from repeatedly choosing ease over what's right. It's the result of a series of delays, of just this once, of times you knew what needed to be done and still chose to avoid it. Every time you trade something important for immediate comfort, you are removing a brick from the foundation of your future, and one day you'll find yourself facing a shaky, unstable, shallow reality. Not because you lacked ability, but because you weren't careful with what seemed too small to matter. On the other hand, those who build something solid are not perfect people. They've also felt tired, tempted to quit, seduced by shortcuts. But they understood a brick laid in the right place today strengthens the wall tomorrow. They don't chase perfection. They pursue repeated correctness. And that consistency, not flashy, not loud, accumulates into a powerful system where they no longer need motivation to move forward. They simply remind themselves every decision carries weight. Absolutely. You don't need to do something grand to change your life. You only need to do what's right, even when it's small, dull, or goes unnoticed. The choice lies in every moment. Will you nurture integrity or feed procrastination? Will you go to bed on time or let one more video steal another hour? Will you get up and work or wait for inspiration to knock? Life isn't built on good intentions, it's built on behavior. And behavior is the direct result of choices, repeated every single day. Consistency begins with honoring the details, not skipping the small things because they don't matter, not abandoning what needs to be done just because you're too tired. Because every time you excuse yourself in the small things, you remove another brick from the structure. No one collapses from one big mistake. They crumble from letting hundreds of small missteps pass unchecked. Likewise, no one succeeds from one glorious win. They succeed because they've silently won countless times. Over themselves, over procrastination, over distraction. Choices don't need to be dramatic to be valuable. Sometimes the most important choice of your day is to stand up and tidy your space to restore clarity in your mind, to turn off your phone for 30 minutes and read a few pages of a book that nourishes your intellect, to say no to a toxic conversation just to protect your mental well-being. No one sees those things, no one applauds. But that's how you show respect to the future version of yourself. You don't need a big reason to act. Just remember, every decision shapes the next version of you, and that version will either take you closer to or further from the life you truly want. If you're living a reality you're not happy with, don't look for reasons in others. Look at the choices you've made each day, what you've prioritized, what you've allowed into your thoughts and habits. Because results don't betray anyone. They simply reflect exactly how you've lived. The future isn't in a plan. It's in your choices right now. What do you want to build? A fragile house propped up by emotions, or a solid structure built with discipline, focus, and persistence? Every action you take today, no matter how small or unnoticed, is shaping that house. And one day, you will have to live inside it. You won't be able to move out. You won't be able to blame anyone else. You'll only be able to take responsibility. Not every wound needs to be spoken. Not every pain requires someone to listen. Some things can only truly heal when no one is asking, when the noise of hollow encouragement fades, when there are no pitying glances or watchful eyes from people who don't truly understand. The deepest healing always happens in silence, where you no longer try to prove you're okay, where you don't have to pretend to be strong, where you're allowed to be your most authentic self, exhausted, hurt, but still trying. Healing is not a story to be told, it is an inner journey, private, quiet, where each broken piece is picked up, not for display, but to be put back together in a way only you can understand. No one can see the full depth of the pain you've endured. They may witness a tear, but they don't see the long nights you lay still in the dark, hollow, with nothing to hold on to, but the faint will that says you must keep going. It is in that space, without an audience, without praise, without guidance, that healing begins. You don't need to share to validate that you're healing. That process was never meant for outsiders. It doesn't require recognition. It only requires persistence. Healing in silence is when you learn to hold yourself after every collapse. It's when you look at an old scar and feel no hatred. It's when you choose silence, not because you've gone numb, but because you know not every feeling needs expression. Not every wound needs to be understood. Some pains cannot be put into words. They can only be heard by you. When you stop seeking empathy and begin learning how to befriend yourself, you finally step into the true healing process. You no longer hope someone will fill the emptiness. You learn to let it exist, to let it become the space where growth takes root. Healing doesn't come from forced forgetting. It comes from having the courage to look back without flinching, and that only happens in stillness, when you're no longer distracted by the voices outside. Real healing is not glamorous. It doesn't result in pretty pictures or inspiring content to share. It's a monotonous, repetitive, patient process, filled with tired mornings where you still choose to rise. With days no one checks in, but you still push through the work. With nights where no one holds you, but you still learn how to fall asleep in peace. And then one day you realize you no longer need someone to keep you standing, not because you don't need love, but because you've become full from within. When you heal in silence, you're no longer driven by the hunger to be understood. You stop needing others to see your pain, to acknowledge your endurance. Instead, you find strength in gratitude. Grateful that you made it through, grateful that you're still here, still strong enough to continue. The moment you stop seeking validation is when you become your strongest. Because from then on, you no longer live as a victim. You become the healer. And silent healing always carries a dignity no amount of storytelling can replicate. Healing in silence is also how you protect your energy. You no longer open your inner world to just anyone who might judge or hurt you further. You no longer speak just for the sake of temporary comfort. You understand that what needs healing must be nurtured with awareness, not pity. You begin setting boundaries, not from resentment, but because you've learned. Peace doesn't come on its own. It must be protected, maintained, and consciously cultivated. Some days you'll feel okay for healing. Some days you'll feel okay, and the next like you've fallen to the bottom again. Some memories you thought were gone return in a dream, but you no longer panic, because you know healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with the things that once hurt you without letting them control you anymore. And that is the clearest sign of emotional maturity. When you heal in silence, you also become a safe place for others without needing to say much. People feel your strength not through advice, but through your calm, gentle, non-judgmental presence. You no longer say, "I understand," to perform empathy, but because you truly do. And those who have walked through pain and silence carry with them a quiet compassion that needs no explanation, yet always makes others feel safe. In a world that equates progress with recognition, people forget that the deepest value of personal growth isn't about whether someone sees it. It's about how you've changed when no one was watching. There's no applause when you choose silence instead of reacting. No spotlight when you sit alone to continue writing an unfinished chapter of your life. And no cheering audience when you say no to distractions to protect one focused hour filled with commitment. Yet those are the exact moments when you grow, powerfully and sustainably, in ways no praise can match. People often celebrate results, but rarely pay attention to the process. They applaud the moment you succeed, but few remember the sleepless nights, the mornings you woke up without motivation, the times you had to pull yourself together when no one else believed in you. The truth is, personal growth always begins in solitude, in the moments when it's just you and the choice to keep going or give up. And if you've ever chosen to keep going, even without anyone by your side, then you're walking a path far nobler than any form of recognition. Maturity makes no sound. It requires no announcement. It doesn't happen loudly. It reveals itself in how you respond to failure, how you remain calm in chaos, how you treat yourself when you fall short. No applause needed, just the quiet truth that today you handled things better than yesterday, that you were more patient, more composed, more aware, and kinder to yourself. That's real growth, the kind no one sees, but you feel deeply. Not everyone deserves to enter the sacred space where your transformation unfolds. Some things are meant to happen quietly, not because you're hiding them, but because you're honoring them. Every time you choose to learn something new, not to show off, but to understand more deeply. Every time you adjust your behavior without needing an audience. Every time you decline what's easy in favor of what's disciplined. All of these are silent proofs of personal evolution, undocumented, uncelebrated, but undeniably real. You don't need to prove to anyone that you're growing. You just need to live in such a way that your growth becomes undeniable. It shows in the clarity of your eyes, the steadiness of your step, the calm in your voice, and in how you listen without rushing to judge. No introductions are necessary. Others will feel you've changed, because deep change always carries its own energy. Quiet, slow, but unmistakable. Personal growth isn't necessarily a revolution. Sometimes it's simply choosing not to complain when things don't go your way. It's when you recognize your mistake and have the courage to own it. It's when you stop trying to impress and start focusing on living with integrity. Small things like these, repeated daily, are the true material of maturity. Not through degrees or titles, but through the way one exists, whole and peaceful in a chaotic world. When you stop seeking validation, you begin to live more truthfully. You stop trying to be special just to be noticed and start doing what's right to earn your own respect. You no longer ask, "Do others see that I've improved?" and begin asking, "Am I living true to myself?" And that's the moment you begin to step out of dependence, out of the realm of those who wait for someone else to affirm before daring to believe they're on the right path. Remember this, applause may come and go, but inner clarity stays. No amount of external recognition, no matter how great, can replace the profound sense that says, "I've truly grown." And that feeling only comes after hundreds of unacknowledged choices, thousands of quiet adjustments, and countless moments when you wanted to quit but kept going anyway. Don't live a life just to receive noise. Live a life deep enough to create change in silence. Don't wait for applause to believe you're on the right path. Real progress doesn't need an audience. It only needs you to keep going, even when no one praises, no one supports, no one sees. Because you're not living to impress, you're living to become the best version of yourself, for you, for the ones you love, and for the world you quietly long to impact. You might run faster than the person next to you. You might speak more eloquently, earn more money, receive more praise and admiration than they do. But if you're still carrying the same old limitations, the same old habits, and the same outdated ways of thinking, then you haven't truly gone far. External victories can never compensate for internal defeats. The only race worthy of your full focus, discipline, and commitment is the race against who you were yesterday. That is the only fair, sustainable, and deeply meaningful competition. Others can inspire you, but they are not the benchmark for your journey. You didn't start from where they did. You don't carry the same wounds or resources, and you weren't born with the same mission. Every person flows in a different stream. Comparison only leads you to lose yourself. It misguides you into chasing standards that were never yours, pursuing goals that weren't meant for you, and worse, it causes you to forget your former self, the one who fought so hard just to get you to where you stand today. Have you ever looked back and asked how you lived yesterday? What thoughts you carried? How you responded to the things beyond your control? If you face yourself honestly, you'll realize there were many ways you could have done better, chosen more wisely, listened more instead of talking, or let go sooner rather than holding on to something that no longer fits. And if today you are learning to adjust those things, then you've already overcome the most important opponent of your life, who you were yesterday. External competition always ends, but internal improvement is a never-ending path. The more you grow, the more cunning your yesterday self becomes, more skilled at luring you back into your comfort zone. It will pretend you're tired, that you deserve to rest, that you've done enough, that there's no need to push further. But the truth is, you are never fighting anyone else but your own mind. The greatest enemy isn't outside. It's the voice within that tells you just give up when you haven't even reached halfway. It's procrastination disguised in reasonable excuses. It's fear of failure masked as, I'm just being cautious. You can't conquer what you refuse to confront. And the hardest thing to face isn't someone more talented than you. It's the version of yourself from yesterday. The one who knows exactly where you tend to give up, where you're likely to compromise, and when you typically make excuses. But that's also why, when you finally surpass your old self, you don't just move forward. You break free from an invisible chain that has held you in place for far too long. There's no applause. No one will cheer. But deep in your subconscious, a door has just opened. Every day is a chance to rewrite an old script. You don't need to do extraordinary things to prove you've changed. Sometimes it's just waking up on time, not reaching for your phone during the first 2 hours of the day, drinking water instead of coffee, focusing on a task for 90 minutes without distraction, or finally forgiving something that's weighed you down for far too long. These small acts, repeated and accumulated, are the greatest victories of all, victories over yourself. Those who live deeply don't chase after flashiness. They live in awareness. They know what they're doing, why they're doing it, and whether it brings them closer to the person they want to become. They don't seek to be better than others. They only strive to be better than who they were yesterday. More patient, more focused, more conscious, and more composed. It's a quiet competition, but one that endures, and it takes them farther than anyone who flaunts shallow wins. No one can stop you from growing if you're truly committed to improving each day. No one expects you to be perfect right away, but you must ask yourself one question at the end of each day. In what way did I live better than I did yesterday? If you can't answer clearly, then maybe you've been delaying your own growth by watching the growth of others too closely. Life doesn't reward those who move fastest. It rewards those who move in the right direction. And never stop. The right direction is the one that brings you closer to yourself. It's the place where you no longer have to strain to stand out, but simply take one step back from old habits and one step forward toward your higher self. Real upgrades don't need drum rolls, they need consistency. And the only person you ever need to defeat is the person you used to be. Not everyone who gets hurt collapses. And not everyone who gets back up is truly healed. Some people only learn how to hide their pain. Some learn to use it as a motivation to grow, but there is a rarer kind of person, the one who turns pain into purpose. They don't run away, don't try to forget, and don't pretend it didn't happen. They stare directly at what broke them and use it as the reason to never return to that wound again. They don't let pain define them. They use it as a launching pad to step into a stronger version of themselves, one where pain no longer has control. Maybe you failed because you were betrayed, were hurt because you were belittled, or lost your faith because you trusted the wrong person. These things should not repeat. But the irony is, they will if you don't do anything differently. Pain is not something to be hidden. It is something that must be placed in its rightful context. When it is used to react, you will live in resentment. But when it is used to direct, you will live with a clarity of purpose like never before. And those whose purpose is born from pain are often more resolute than those whose motivation comes from praise. What does pain teach you that comfort never could? It teaches you the limits of endurance, the nature of people, and most importantly, it teaches you about yourself. You learn what makes you lose control, what makes you weak, what makes you react impulsively. If you are brave enough not to look away when these lessons appear, you will see that pain doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to strip you bare so you can no longer pretend. Picture the most painful moment of your life. Not to dwell in sorrow, but to identify, since then, how have you lived differently? Have you become more careful in choosing your companions? Have you learned to say no at the right moment? Have you learned to comfort yourself instead of depending on outside attention? If the answer is no, then that pain has not been transformed into purpose. It is still lying there like a rock at the bottom of your mind, waiting for the next impact to awaken it. Do think, maybe I could have been transformed into purpose. It is still lying there like a rock at the bottom of your mind, waiting for the next impact to awaken it. But if you've begun to say, I won't let that happen again, and started taking action, reading to understand yourself, exercising to build willpower, staying silent to manage emotions, working daily to raise your value, then that pain has become your compass. The goal is no longer to achieve something grand, but rather, I will never live like the person who once collapsed. That is the most silent kind of power. It requires no announcement, no applause, only perseverance and certainty. Successful people are not those who've never been hurt. They differ from others in one key way. They don't waste their pain. They don't sit around waiting for apologies. They don't blame their circumstances. They know that if they don't do something with their pain, the pain will do something to them, and usually it's destructive. It destroys trust, damages relationships, and erodes focus. So they transmute it. They write down clear goals. I must stand on my own. I must build a life strong enough that no one can touch that weak spot again. Not all pain is bad. Some pain makes you angry, and you use that anger to reclaim justice for yourself. Some pain leaves you lonely, and you use that solitude to understand what truly nourishes your inner self. Some pain leaves you drained, and you use that emptiness as a wake-up call. No one can survive if they keep giving without knowing how to preserve the good within themselves. These kinds of pain, when used properly, become the most sustainable fuel, not the fleeting high of dopamine, but a deep kind of energy, not driven by emotion, only by commitment. Whenever you feel unmotivated, remember what once brought you to your knees. Ask yourself, did I survive all that only to now abandon myself? No. Don't let the pain be in vain. Don't let your tears mean nothing. Don't let the breakdown be just a scar. Let it be a sacred mark on the map of your personal growth. Look back and say, I was there, I was buried, but I didn't stay there. I turned it into the place where I began. It's not time, it's not money, it's not reputation or relationships. The most precious asset you possess in this life is your energy. A person may have many hours in a day, may have countless good opportunities, But if they lack the right energy, everything becomes meaningless. And the dangerous part is that energy isn't stolen by an obvious enemy. It's drained by small, unsuspected things, a pointless conversation, a message that saps your spirit, a seemingly harmless habit that disrupts your nervous system. That's why a truly mature person doesn't just manage their time, they protect their energy like a sacred treasure. Each morning you wake up with a limited energy account, and from that moment you start spending. An unnecessary call, minus 10 units. Mindless scrolling through social media, minus 20 more. A useless argument, another 30 gone. And by the end of the day, you don't understand why you're exhausted, why you can't complete anything, and why life feels increasingly heavy. It's not because you're doing too much, it's because you're spending in the wrong places. It's not because you lack strength, it's because you're ignoring the quiet depletion happening within. Your life energy. Protecting your energy doesn't mean shutting yourself off. It means becoming selective. You choose who gets to enter your space. You choose what's allowed to reach your mind. You choose which types of conversations are worth keeping in your head and which types of people must be kept at a distance. Because you understand, energy isn't just emotion. It's the foundational fuel for every decision, every creation, and every connection. A mind full of energy is the foundation of a fulfilling life. Conversely, a mind invaded by chaos leads to a cascade of consequences, loss of focus, irritability, impulsive reactions, or self-doubt. A person who knows how to protect their energy is someone with clear boundaries. They don't waste time explaining things that don't deserve an explanation. They don't exhaust themselves trying to please everyone. They don't feel guilty for saying no to what drains them. They don't force themselves to be nice at the cost of their own peace, because they know once their energy is depleted, they'll have nothing of value left to give, not even to themselves. A truly wealthy person is someone who can preserve their inner resources before they leak away through unseen holes. In a world full of noise, the one who knows how to remain silent is the one protecting their energy. In a competitive environment, the one who retreats at the right time is the one protecting their energy. In a society obsessed with display, the one who chooses to work quietly is the one who understands where energy is best invested. Energy isn't for proving anything, it's for building. And you can't build anything solid if every minute is stolen by meaningless noise. Some people enter your life like light. They energize you, give you clarity, and sharpen your focus. But others come like shadows. You don't notice at first, but after a few encounters, you find yourself exhausted, doubting yourself, and slowly losing the peace you once had. Don't underestimate that, because energy is contagious, and you are the average of the environment you allow yourself to soak in. If you stay in a space that drains you, don't expect to create anything inspired or live a purposeful life. Protecting your energy isn't just about choosing the right people and the right tasks. It's also about choosing the right relationship with yourself. Self-criticism, reliving old memories, or constantly doubting your own worth, these are subtle yet powerful forms of energy leakage. Pay attention to how you talk to yourself. Does that inner voice uplift you, or is it gradually wearing you down? Maturity isn't about how many failures you avoid, but about how you return again and again after falling, and choose to speak to yourself with understanding, not blame. You can learn hundreds of skills, but if you don't learn how to protect your energy, everything remains fragile, because energy is the root. It is the starting point of all clarity, creativity, and mental strength. And because it's that precious, you cannot let anyone spend it carelessly. Not everyone who calls you deserves a response. Not every story needs your ears. Not everyone who asks for help must be helped. Kindness doesn't mean being easily drained. And maturity doesn't mean enduring endlessly.